everybody. So today we're going to be ticking something off the old GC response video checklist by responding to a Sam Collins video. I have not responded to a single Sam Collins video the entire time I've been on this channel, I hope. It's going to seem very awkward if I actually have and I've just forgotten it. And, you know, I see these videos come up and I've never seen one which I thought was worth responding to. And to be honest, when I saw this, I didn't think it was going to be that worth responding to, because today we're going to be talking about two videos Sam Collins made about Matt Walsh's book, Johnny the Walrus, I think is what it's called. Now, obviously, I already made a video on Samantha Lux talking about Matt Walsh, and throughout it, of course, I was aware in the back of my mind of the fact that Matt Walsh and I probably don't agree on that much. We're probably not really on the same side in lots of senses. But since I made that video responding to Samantha, I've now found out a few more things about Matt Walsh, and I've discovered that not only is he Catholic, boo, but he also made a very stupid tweet about mental illness, where he said, depression and anxiety aren't mental illnesses because feeling sad or feeling anxious are natural human emotions. And it's like, just on the surface, does he think cancer's not a mental illness because like cells reproducing is natural? Or does he recognize that actually when your cell reproduction isn't functioning the way it should and you have a cancerous growth, that actually is an illness and it's a problem? Because obviously anxiety is a thing that exists for a reason, to keep you safe from stuff, but pretty obviously if you're having panic attacks just randomly out of nowhere or because of very minor stimulus, then that's a mental illness. You know, I can speak about anxiety because, of course, I've had issues with anxiety, and Matt Walsh, it's a mental illness, and it requires treatment like a mental illness as well. I'm mostly saying this because I actually thought it was like such a stupid tweet that I did think to myself, oh, I wish I had a platform from which I could point out what a stupid tweet this is. And of course, regarding depression, similar thing, like being so miserable for no reason. It's like so miserable you can't get out of bed, you have no motivation even to make food. Yeah, that's an illness. It's your brain not functioning the way it should be functioning, the exact same way that if other organs in your body, other parts of your body don't function the way they should be functioning, that's quite likely an illness as well. So I was thinking, yeah, not only is this very stupid, but also, of course, yeah, I do want to just make it clear. It's not as if I agree with Matt Walsh. It's not as if I'm sat there being like, oh, Matt Walsh, impart your wisdom onto us from on high because you're so smart. Really, I mean, Matt Walsh basically just said some pretty obvious and easily defensible stuff in the Dr. Phil interview, and it was mostly just an opportunity for me to look at what the people arguing against Matt Walsh and, of course, Samantha Lux were saying in response, to see whether or not they did a good job responding to the pretty easy points that Matt Walsh was making. And they didn't do a good job, and that's why I responded. So why am I returning back to the Matt Walsh well to lower my bucket and take out some more content? It's because Sam Collins is specifically responding to a book by Matt Walsh, the book that I think has really started his whole involvement in the gender identity debate, which is this book, Johnny the Walrus. And essentially, Johnny the Walrus, as far as I can tell, is basically the attack helicopter meme turned into a book. And something that I've pointed out before when the things adjacent to the attack helicopter meme have been mentioned is, but there isn't really a response to it. There isn't a good objection. People will make fun of this comparison. If I can just identify as a woman, why can't I just identify as an attack helicopter? People will make fun of that. But there's not really been that many good responses to that objection. And of course, this video is kind of, in many ways, almost a spiritual sequel to that time when Demon Mama said that it was super easy to respond to the transracial point, and then literally did a 180 in the middle of the response, which was very funny. So generally speaking, it seems to me like when these type of people, gender identity extremists, trans identity advocates, say, oh, this is a very easy response to make, and the objection from people who disagree with us is very stupid, most of the time they don't actually do a good job responding to the objections. So what I'm hoping is that in these two videos, Sam Collins will offer up a response to Matt Walsh's central objection as laid out in this book. Just because you want to identify something, it doesn't mean that it makes sense for you to identify as that thing, and it doesn't mean that you actually are that thing. That is a pretty obvious objection to the claim, I identify as a woman, I want to identify as a woman, therefore I identify as a woman, therefore I am a woman, or indeed, obviously in the case of Sam, I identify as a man because I want to identify as a man, therefore I am a man. It's pretty obvious how the response, well, if you're just going to say that your desire to identify as something validates you actually being that thing, then how far does that go? Does it extend to race and other social constructs? Does it extend to inanimate objects? And so on and so forth. So is Sam Collins going to do a good job at showing that actually this comparison is stupid? So I hope that introduction was more than enough to explain what I'm hoping to achieve here. We'll see whether or not Sam Collins actually offers any kind of interesting objections to this comparison, and let's jump in.
So what our boy Matt did over here was he wrote a child's book about a kid who transitions into a walrus. He's selling it under the LGBTQ section.
Well, that makes, a lot of sense, because lots of lesbians and gays are to varying degrees gender non-conforming, and therefore quite likely to encounter people perhaps trying to impose this idea that they might have been born in the wrong body, that they might actually be a gender that does not correspond to the reality of their biological sex. So this kind of book would be a very useful resource for young lesbians and gay children to read. So it doesn't seem like that's an issue to me.
This is literally propaganda. You know, people like Matt always say that my mere existence is propaganda, and teaching people about my existence is propaganda. But when you take a look at this book,
well, it's a very strange objection, because children's books are supposed to have like stories in them, like messages and morals in them. In this case, you're right. There is a very obvious, unambiguous message to this children's book of just because you identify a particular way, that doesn't make it true. It's basically just teaching the importance of acknowledging reality to children, which, first of all, that's a good thing, because children's books should have messages. But second of all, to say it's propaganda almost implies that it's kind of taking a political side and trying to force this political idea on children. But if acknowledging reality has become a political idea, then that's a problem in itself. You know, if you've got to a point where a book that's saying just because you identify as something, that doesn't actually change reality to make you that thing, when that's being characterized as propaganda rather than just teaching children basic common sense, that's when we know we've got a problem.
It is very clear cut. They're not even trying to avoid the ideology that they're pushing on young children. Exactly what I do by...
Hold on a minute, okay. It's not pushing an ideology on young children, because when you think about it, this is basically a message of freedom. It's a message of, do what you want. Basically, children can play and imagine whatever they like, but they need to recognize the distinction between reality and what they might like to imagine. So the only thing imposing anything on children here is reality itself. There isn't an ideology being imposed on children here.
This book is all about identity and imagination. What is identity? Does anyone know what identity means?
No.
Do you know? You know what identity is?
I would not like the job of having to just explain what identity is to a bunch of children, but...
No? Okay. It's who you are, right? That's what it means.
Already, this is a fucking banger. None of these kids know what identity is, because look at them. Look at how small these kids are. And it's funny because this...
Yeah, you can't have a book that's about topics more sophisticated than what a child can understand. No, you can have deep philosophical themes in children's books that might be kind of beyond... I don't think that a lot of children would actually be able to comprehend the wider point being made in this book. But so what? I imagine these children wouldn't be like, if you try to get into really what does identity mean as a fundamental concept, I think that would go over a lot of children's heads. But that's why you kind of reduce it to this slightly more simple message of this kid thinks he's a walrus, but he's not actually a walrus.
A ninja. That's a good one. What about you?
This is quite a cute video.
And his mom's a little silly. She takes it seriously and thinks he really is a walrus. That's silly, isn't it?
So what is this thing doing on the floor?
We don't have to worry about that. We're going to read the book now. Okay.
They're so annoying, aren't they, kids? Always interrupting your story time.
This guy doesn't give a fuck about any of these kids. He's like, shut the fuck up and sit down.
Yeah, I think it is a fun video to watch, and it is, I think, intrinsically. I mean, to be fair, it's a fun video to razz on, but also you get the impression the video itself has a bit of a sense of humor, so it all works out.
One day he's a dog, the next day a crustacean.
Wow, crustacean.
Johnny's mom loves her son's make-believe time. You're Johnny the Walrus till you change your mind.
That's not a rhyme. He's been rhyming up until this point, and then he wants us to accept the fact that time and mind rhyme. Sure, by some metric you could say it's you know, in a rap or something, I would accept somebody rhyming time and mind. But in like a poem where the main strength of it is like the actual proper substance of the rhyme, I'm not having it. No.
The woke mob is saying that your kid is actually a walrus. And if you don't make them transition into a walrus, you're a bigot. Being trans is political.
Yeah, okay, so here's the thing. Bear in mind, this is literally, again, I'm a bit black-pilled on like actual kind of politics in the UK, so I haven't really been paying that much attention to it. But I do know that recently the consultation period ended for the conversion therapy ban in the UK. And I'm not sure what the end results of it's going to be, but quite possibly, and certainly, you know, I mean, obviously this has already happened in some countries, you could get to a situation where if you get a child biological sex affirming therapeutic care, you could go to prison for that, because you're trying to get children to get over mental health issues they have through therapy, but therapy that's going to acknowledge the reality of their biological sex, and that will be perceived as denying and trying to convert the child from their gender identity. So not only are there crazy people on the internet doing this whole, like, if you don't go along with how your child identifies, then you're a terrible person thing, literally governments are instituting laws that could cause people to get arrested. So yeah, it's not some paranoid fantasy.
He's so mad that he gets called a bigot on the daily. And also, if you're going to write a children's book, don't use the word crustacean and bigots. I feel like these...
Well, there are like lots of old books that use like really like language that's beyond like what a kid can understand. Like I feel like I've gone back and read, I don't know exactly what it is, maybe it's Winnie the Pooh, and it's like you'll read it and then you'll be like, oh wait, that's a word which just wasn't on my, like I wouldn't have known that word when I was a kid. But you kind of just like accept it, and I think it's like maybe it's just a fun way to expose kids to these strange words, even while you know they're not going to be like, oh yeah, it's a crustacean. It's not a bad strategy in terms of writing a children's book, having this sophisticated language in it.
It is very disgusting because, like I said, my existence is constantly debated. Trans people are people, and trans kids exist.
But that's not a response to the objection. I mean, it's kind of funny actually, because the game's like, my existence is constantly debated. But the funny thing is that literally you then give an example of how you're not really, you know, for it to be a debate, really, both sides have to be making points. Really, yeah, it's so the good news is that your existence really isn't being debated, because the side that's arguing that trans identity is valid isn't even trying to defend their side, so it's not really a debate.
They should have drew me out there. This is all of us. I'm surprised they didn't put one with like blue hair, because you know how they always make the meme about the girl with...
Well, there's purple hair. Come on, give some credit. Like, I'm pretty sure the purple hair is supposed to be... I think since The Last Jedi and Admiral Holdo, purple hair's taken over blue hair for like the, performative female representation thing or whatever.
Blue hair. I mean, one of them has purple hair. Human.
Oh, there we go.
The worms give you whiskers, the gray blends you in, the doctor says.
Look at this art for a second, though. Look at this degree.
Yeah, you know what, actually? It is pretty ugly art. Like, this is... Yeah, it looks kind of... I don't know. It just looks... I'm not sure what it is about it. I'm not some art critic or something. But it doesn't... It just comes across as not particularly aesthetically pleasing, the artwork.
Ah, there it is. The whole mutilation thing. Because we chop ourselves up. Remember, when we have surgeries, we're mutilating ourselves and we're chopping ourselves up. It's also funny because this book...
Well, the key point is it's unnecessary surgery. Manifestly unnecessary surgery. And surgery that stops parts of your body from being able to perform the function that they're supposed to do. So it's not as if this is like, you can't compare this to, for example, heart surgery, which is about making your heart be able to do the thing it's supposed to do. If, we're talking about castrating somebody, that's a totally different kind of surgery. Now, obviously, sometimes you can get surgery that's supposed to make certain organs stop doing what they're doing for a variety of reasons. For example, vasectomies would be an obvious example where you're actually stopping your sex organs from doing the function they were supposed to do. But the key point is, in that case, that's the point. You're doing it so that you can achieve this result of not, making people pregnant anymore because you're of a certain age where you've decided you don't want to have any more kids or whatever. What's more concerning is when you're talking about children getting surgery that will permanently make certain organs they have unable to fulfill those functions, not to mention, of course, all the other side effects that come from pumping somebody filled with hormones that their body is kind of not naturally suited for. And they're doing all of that because of this ideological supposition that is not actually, well, it doesn't actually make much sense at all. That's a very different scenario.
Over again, and many trans people have said that children don't get surgeries.
This is true, but there's a few issues here. One, you can take surgery as a metaphor, or if you like, a synecdoche for the entire idea of medical transition, and children do begin medical transition with, for example, puberty blockers, which are not reversible, because the effect of not having got your puberty at a certain age will be permanent. The reality is that there is a degree to which medical intervention happens at a young age. So sure, actual literal surgery doesn't happen. But then there's another issue, which is, well, I kind of suspect there are some people who actually would like to make it so children can get surgery. Are we really pretending that if some of the craziest gender identity extremists didn't have their way, that we wouldn't see kids, or did get their way, that we wouldn't see kids actually being like, oh yeah, children should be able to get surgery at like incredibly young ages. So while it's not something that is happening, since this is a criticism of the ideology, I think you're likely to see this particular belief within the extreme elements of this ideology. And even then, I say extreme, I think a worryingly well-represented extreme.
They're all so dang twitchy. He doesn't want to eat worms.
It's not bad for you.
I thought I didn't eat worms, but I did.
That was a fun little comment from that kid.
So does he think that parents are being forced into making their kids transition? And also another thing kids can't...
Well, again, parents can face literal penalties if they want to offer their children any kind of therapeutic care other than, gender identity affirming care. That's something which is happening, and I think it's already happened in countries like Canada, of course, because of course it's happened in Canada. It's happening in the UK. Like, how can you even unironically say Turf Island about the UK when we're literally... again, I'm not sure exactly what the conversion therapy ban will end up looking like, but I don't have that much confidence. So yeah, and the fact that it's even, this is even something that's on the cards. It's something which is being debated. Should parents be allowed to explore other avenues of therapeutic care for their children that aren't gender identity affirming. That is tantamount to forcing parents to accept this idea that gender identity is valid.
Parents aren't forcing their kids into transition because Twitter's mad at them, because the internet is mad at them, like you stated in your book. Like, where is that happening? This is what I mean with these people.
Okay, also, it's a very myopic kind of understanding of the point being made here. It's more about like the general culture creating this sense of obligation to go along with this stuff. So by like atomizing it, I think that's the term. I really want that to be the term. By atomizing it to this one particular thing of like one individual parent who just people on Twitter tell them to go along with how their kid's identifying. Well, is that happening? No, not well. I mean, it could, I'm not saying that's not happening at all. But really, it's more like the general culture of just like, you can't question this idea of gender identity. I mean, really, the general idea of even accepting that transgender identity as a concept makes much sense. This all forms part of the kind of social context where people who might otherwise not be doing all of this stuff are doing this stuff. So it's a bit broader in terms of what exactly is going on. Rather than just like very specific, like there's one source where this one particular person is doing this one particular thing. Obviously that's silly, but it's a children's book. It's supposed to be, specifying things to make it a bit easier to understand.
Now she's going to take her son to go live at the zoo like he's a real walrus.
I don't want to live at the zoo.
When Johnny arrived, the walruses grunted. And the mom
See, actually, what I'd like is if this now transitions to a narrative about like walrus-only spaces and how the walruses. I mean, to be fair, it is kind of worth noting that you could make an argument that there's something a bit kind of men's rightsy about Matt Walsh's presentation here. Like the fact that this is the story Matt Walsh has chosen to tell, a story where it's about a biological male and the person, or rather the group that the biological male is identifying as, are basically not even human. Obviously, it kind of works as a way to show the absurdity of gender identity, but it does create a situation where if you were to then try to apply this to the idea of biological males identifying as women, you have to have the women be like not even human. Again, I'm not suggesting that that's what Matt Walsh is actually saying, but it's just like, obviously, this creates a situation where the focus is put entirely on the male experience of trans identity rather than the deleterious effects for the people whom the male is deciding to identify as. And obviously in real life, it wouldn't be a bunch of walruses who, to be honest, probably wouldn't be bothered having somebody identify as them. It would be women who would probably have lots of thoughts and feelings and concerns about what's happening here. So yeah, just, again, I'm not like really like being super critical of Matt Walsh. I'm just pointing out that by the very nature of the analogy that's been constructed here, it's actually glossing over lots of the concerns that the women would have in a situation where a biological male is identifying as a woman.
Mommy says, "My boy's a real walrus. His growth was just stunted." I mean, she really thinks this kid is a walrus.
But it's not.
That kid, can I just say, is a smart kid. He's not a walrus. And notice that, what I would like to ask that kid is, what referent are you using when you say that kid's not a walrus? And why do you think that the kid's identity as a walrus isn't a sufficient basis for saying they are a walrus? I wouldn't necessarily expect a particularly substantial answer, but it would be nice just to introduce the kid to those kind of questions, and imagine that it made some kind of difference to how that kid is able to recognize the basis upon which we talk about reality.
No.
Bigot. Are you mad?
I like, calling the kid a bigot. Bigot. I mean, I will actually say this, okay, so at several points now, Sam has done the whole, like, Matt Walsh is so mad. I can't believe how mad Matt Walsh is about, people transitioning or being called a bigot or whatever else. The thing is, like, it's worth noting that Sam, in this video, has undeniably seemed quite mad about this book. So ultimately, I'm not saying, the thing is, obviously, it's just kind of pointless to do like the whole "you mad" thing, because, well, people might be mad. But yeah, just wanted to point that out.
Johnny wants to go in the restroom because Johnny's a walrus. But all the other walruses are like, yeah, you can't come in here because you're not actually one of us, so you have to go.
The zookeeper
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking. But again, I don't really know if walruses would actually be bothered by it.
thought, what's she talking about? Ma'am, that's just a boy with...
Hey, hold on a minute. The zookeeper looks like Matt Walsh. Wow. Do you think Matt Walsh... Oh, wait, I just realized. It says Walsh on the name. That's a real M. Night Shyamalan moment right there. What a self-insert. And I hate to say it, but he's made the zookeeper look kind of buff, which, it's okay, but it's just kind of like Matt Walsh started off the video making kind of a self-deprecating joke about being ugly, but now when he actually does a self-insert character in a book, it's like this slim guy who's like kind of, got muscular, he's got the pecs, he's, got the broad shoulders, he's wearing sunglasses because he's so cool. Yeah, I don't know. That's a pretty hot zookeeper, and I just think, it's a little bit egotistical to have that be your self-insert.
Woods
For me, I would have my self-insert be the walrus.
spoons in his mouth. Now he's the voice of reason.
Yeah, see, that's pretty. Yeah, see, my self-insert character, he's the voice of reason. Okay, Matt.
But if I believe that, they'll say that I'm phobic. Protecting your son, ma'am, is what's most heroic.
It's not. I mean, the thing is, it does rhyme oic and obic, but it just doesn't seem right.
At last, Johnny's mommy was able to see that Johnny's not what he's pretending to be.
That's a good rhyme. I like that. I was able to see that Johnny's not what he's pretending to be. Yeah, well done. That's a nice rhyme.
Now mommy ignores the mean things on her phone while Johnny pretends he's a bird flying home.
Again, another half rhyme, isn't it? Ohm. I mean, it's better. It's better than the other one, whatever it was. But it's just not quite great. But overall, I mean, it was a good ending. So yeah, basically the ending is that she ignores all the crazy people, which again, like I say, I think is supposed to be more of a general idea of like society in general saying like accept transgender identity, ignore that because it's nonsense, and just keep living your life like a cool person.
The end.
Yeah, moral of the story. Kids like to pretend to be things, but that doesn't mean they really are those things.
That's true. Yeah, okay, so we're not so close to the end, but we are here. And I want to say, so far, obviously I said going into this video, I was expecting this to maybe be a takedown, a response to the very claim that like there is some equivalent between identifying as a woman and being accepted as a woman and identifying as a walrus and being accepted as a walrus. Thus far, Sam hasn't actually responded to the central argument of this book. What I guess obviously is also known as the attack helicopter argument. Sam hasn't responded to it, but so far I just thought it was worth noting most of the substance of this video has been either criticizing kind of periphery inaccuracies in the book, which again, I think inaccuracies that are mostly explained by the book, not trying to be like, I mean, it's about a kid pretending he's a walrus, right? It's not supposed to be 100% accurate. Versus also complaining about the general like presentation and reality of Matt Walsh reading the book and having written the book, but no actual response to the central point of the book, which is if you identify as something, that doesn't make you that thing. So let's see if there is going to be a response to that.
Kids love to pretend to be Spider-Man or a pig or crustaceans. They don't pretend to be transgender. It's not the same thing.
Well, that doesn't make any sense. They don't pretend to be transgender. The point is, that was not a good response. Being transgender is itself pretending. That's the point. That's like saying, it's kind of weird because obviously there's transgender is one of the few terms that actually in itself describes within it the act of pretending. Transgender means you say that you're a woman even though you're biologically male. That is pretending. So to say, saying they don't pretend to be transgender is incoherent. It's basically saying they don't pretend to be women. It's like, okay, I'm not saying that they're pretending to be women. I'm saying they're pretending to be women.
Now, what happened if I wrote a book in a positive light, catered to children, about a girl who transitioned into a boy?
Well, first of all, let's just be clear. I'm 100% sure that that book exists. I would be very surprised if there's not a single book for children about being transgender. The real thing you should have said is, what if I wrote a book about a kid who transitions to be a walrus and should be accepted as a walrus based on that? Which, by the way, I mean, obviously it should be pointed out, this is like, it makes me think about that Kevin Smith movie, Tusk. But yeah, basically, again, another kind of opportunity to avoid the reality of like, why are you acting as if there is a substantive difference between claiming to be a walrus versus claiming to be a woman when you're biologically male? And again, it's worth noting we still haven't really seen why it is that we should understand there to be a substantial difference between a biological male claiming to be a woman and a human being claiming to be a walrus.
And everybody around him supported him. And I read it to a class. That would be me pushing my ideas onto young children, right? Encouraging them that they too can do what he did.
Well, I mean, obviously, to some extent, this whole like don't push your ideas on kids thing, it's one of those kind of, it is like a dumb thing that people say, to be honest, because really, obviously, everybody should push ideas on kids, because otherwise you're just going to raise empty shells of human beings. Like, you have to push some ideas on kids. To be honest, I've always found it a bit weird when people say like, oh, don't raise your kids to be religious. And it's like, but, you know, if you believe something's true, I understand the logic that you're going to raise your kids to believe that thing, because what else are you going to do? Raise them to believe nothing? Raise them to believe something that's directly not what you believe? It just seems kind of silly to me. So really, I mean, there's two principal objections. I think like the idea of just presenting ideas to children as things they should believe is not in itself an issue. There's two problems though. First one is, does the idea make sense? So for me personally, like genuinely, I don't have a problem with people enforcing on their kids this idea that biological males can't be women, because that's such a self-evidently correct and intuitively obvious idea that, yeah, if you want to force that idea on your kids, good. Force on your kids the idea like that the earth revolves around the sun. Force the idea on your kids that 2 + 2 = 2. Force on your kids the idea that biological males can't be women. That's fine. And of course, the flip side is, you know, that's kind of the point, you know, like if you've got one group of people teaching their kids to believe 2 + 2 = 2, and another group of people teaching their kids, sorry, did I say 2 + 2 = 2? I might have said that once before and have just said it then. So let me just correct that. If you've got one group of people, yes, that's embarrassing, but it's fine. You'll forgive me. And you know, I mean, I think I said before, I'm not so great with maths. I'm more of a humanities kind of guy. But yeah, okay, so you teach your kids that 2 + 2 = 4. You've got one group of people teaching their kids 2 + 2 = 4, and one group of people teaching their kids that 2 + 2 = 3, or indeed that 2 + 2 = 2. The question isn't to what extent, like, are they both forcing their ideas? What needs to be appreciated is the difference between what they're actually teaching their kids, and that one idea is true, the other idea isn't. And in the exact same sense, I think that applies to the relationship between the categories of man and woman and the idea of biological sex, where, yeah, one group of people is teaching something which is true and correct, the other group isn't. Now, the other thing that's worth pointing out is like the degree to which you're allowed to question this idea. And obviously, this is something which I'm not saying that Sam, I was about to say Sam Walsh. I'm not saying that Sam would necessarily write a book that tried to enforce this idea, but very commonly I think children are being taught that they're bigoted and they're hateful if they even question this idea that somebody's trans identity is valid. So that's something where you're actually, in a very meaningful sense, enforcing this idea on children. Because obviously, even when you teach something which is obviously true to a kid, you should still be like, okay, but it's worth questioning this, because this, I mean, obviously this is true, so questioning it isn't going to cause any issues. You know, people don't teach their kids that 2 + 2 = 4 and then say, and never question this. Don't ever question this. Because actually, if they did question it, they're not going to, you know, they're not going to find themselves failing to recognize that 2 + 2 = 4. But conversely, when you teach kids that a biological male is a woman if they identify as that, there is no reason why that's self-evidently true. Indeed, you certainly couldn't say that questioning it definitely won't lead you to the conclusion it's false, when so many people, like myself, have questioned it and come to the conclusion that it is false. So instead, you do have to enforce this idea and say, don't question this. How dare you? Don't disagree with it. Because, yeah, that's the only way you can enforce it. So that's another significant difference in that when you teach your kids that transgender identity is valid, and that if they question that, they're being bigoted, they're being horrible, if they listen to and explore ideas of gender-critical feminists, for example, that's a very terrible thing to be doing, and they should no platform gender-critical feminists and all of that. That's a very different thing to be doing. So for me, yeah, those are the idea of teaching your kids truth claims is fine, but it obviously makes a difference to what extent those claims actually are credible, first of all, and secondly, whether or not you're teaching kids that it's totally okay for them to question this stuff, or if you're teaching kids actually they're pretty horrible and evil and bigoted if they question this stuff.
Because like I said, my existence is completely political. Trans kids' existence is completely political. And it would be so bad, wouldn't it? But it's okay when you do it, right? It's ridiculous. It's sad. Like, this man wrote a whole book basically mocking trans people. I think that's a little weird.
Well, it's not that. He wrote a whole book about defending the reality that reality is reality, which is a pretty, it's a pretty important message for kids nowadays with...
Now, my favorite thing about...
Oh, I didn't mean to press play there. The whole postmodernism thing.
This is by far the most epic of Matt's trolls. His trollsmanship truly knows no bounds. Respect.
Okay, so here's the thing. First of all, this is a pretty upvoted comment, and it does make me think upvoted. Sorry, it's not Reddit. Liked comment. It is kind of funny because obviously the comments were... So a point that's mentioned is that in the video just shown of Matt Walsh, the comments were taken down. And at the beginning, Sam insinuated that this was because Matt was getting a negative backlash. And I was thinking, that doesn't seem to be true, because on the Dr. Phil video, it was filled with people who were on Matt Walsh's side. On this video, where the comments are being now shown, it seems as if there's lots of people on Matt Walsh's side. I would suspect that the comments being disabled on the other video was probably just there are some channels where just comments are just always disabled because they just do that. And even though it seems like actually the channel is, not a channel which is watched by people who hate the content and would leave negative comments, it's just shut down for whatever reason.
You guys, it was ridiculous. It was weird. It does weird me out.
Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. Okay, we'll watch the last 35 seconds just so I can confirm there's nothing else that's going to be more substantial.
I don't know. It seems very immature and weird and obsessive. So, I mean, you can stay...
Okay, yeah, so you know what? I'm not going to watch the last little bit because I don't think anything too massive is going to be said. But yeah, basically, just wanted to say that obviously the main objection here seems to have just been, well... Isn't it weird that he wrote this book? Basically an objection to Matt Walsh having written this book. Like I say, and I'll repeat it again, central argument of, that you identify as something is not a good reason to claim to actually be that thing, to claim that you are in reality that thing, has not been addressed. That this kid, Johnny, identifies as a walrus is not a good reason to conclude that that kid is a walrus, in the exact same way that if a biological male identifies as a woman, that's not in and of itself a good reason to conclude that that kid is, or that biological male in general, is a woman. And obviously there's nothing hateful or offensive about that. It's just that I have not seen any way of defining woman that would lead me to the conclusion that it makes sense to say that a biological male can be a woman. I've not seen that argument presented, and I've not seen it presented here. Okay, so this is the video I saw that actually made me want to go back and respond to that last video, because this is transphobe response to my video. It's only 8 minutes and 47 seconds long. I'm hoping that it will mean that overall this video ends up about an hour. And yeah, I like the idea. It's it's very rare for me to even attempt to respond to 2 videos. Usually I'd make 2 videos responding to 1 video, and I've done 1 video responding to 2 videos. But I'm hoping I'll be able to, seeing as this will just be kind of covering lots of stuff already covered, we can see if there's anything added here. And I might be a bit more conservative in terms of what I respond to here, only responding to stuff which I think really gets to a very important point. But just to make this video slightly unnecessarily longer, I do want to give Sam Collins some credit. There was a TikTok or YouTube short I saw from Sam, which was basically somebody saying, "This is my friend. She goes by they them pronouns."
Yeah, she goes by they them pronouns. I already said that.
And like the joke is obviously that they're saying she while also saying they, you know, like the joke is that they're acknowledging what the pronouns are while simultaneously not actually using the pronouns. And I think that's actually a very funny joke. So I just wanted to give Sam Collins credit for that joke because I find it funny. So well done. Good joke.
Anyways, Matt Walsh responded to my video. And Matt Walsh, you are the first person to ever respond to one of my videos, so you've got balls.
Well, I don't... What? Is that true? First person to ever respond. So I guess this would make me the second person to ever respond to a Sam Collins video. That seems unlike... I mean, obviously, you know, I'm assuming that really Sam means like kind of mainstream person. But even then, I would have thought there's at least some somewhat substantial people have responded to Sam before. I don't know, but yeah, okay.
So this video is called Responding to Transgender YouTuber Allies Who Hate My Children's.
Oh, Walsh. Cursed. Oh, I'm not doing Walsh. We're not, you know, no, we're not looking at Walsh's opinion on Matt Walsh.
My favorite thing about transphobes is they say that we don't exist. I was a trans kid. I existed. And I exist right now. Look at me. I'm not Santa Claus. You can't choose to believe in me or not.
Well, again, the point is that, and obviously, you know, it depends on what you mean by the word trans kid. For me, the reason why I say that trans people, well, actually, see, the thing is, I kind of wonder if I'm maybe putting the cart before the horse here. Me personally, I would say that trans people don't exist because I don't think there is a mechanism by which one can transition from being a man to a woman. That's why I always say trans identified, because I'm saying you're identifying as trans, but you're not actually trans. You're not actually a trans woman. You're not a trans person of any variety because you haven't transitioned from being anything to anything else. So that's why I say trans identified. It's possible that what Matt Walsh is actually about to say is something more along the lines of like trans kids don't exist because it's an idea that's forced upon them, and that no kid, which, you know, it's a little bit like people who say like, oh, there's no such thing as like a Christian kid or a Muslim kid. There's only kids with Muslim parents and whatever else. The reality is, I mean, you know, I don't want to get into this whole kind of doxastic question of whether or not a belief actually counts if it's just something that you got from your parents. For my part, that's not really why I would say trans kids don't exist. I would just say that I haven't encountered any good arguments for why this idea of transitioning being an actual thing that happens makes much sense. So yeah, we'll see what Matt says.
I was with your mom last weekend. She knows that I exist. She knows very, very well that I exist.
I kind of find it funny that that in the last video, Sam made a joke about like the whole like trolling thing in the comments, being like, "Oh, what is this, like 2008? Why are we talking about trolling?" And yet we literally get like a your mum joke. It's fine. It's I don't know. It's such a strange thing to hear from like an adult.
Do you know how gender dysphoria works? You can feel it at a very young age. It's not that shocking. The reason that
Okay, so here's the thing. Nobody's denying that gender dysphoria is, well, maybe Matt Walsh is, because Matt Walsh apparently doesn't believe that like mental health issues are an actual thing. But nobody's denying that gender dysphoria can be a thing kids experience. The question is, on what basis do you conclude that having gender dysphoria means that you are actually, that you've transitioned from being a man to a woman? Gender dysphoria is simply the deep and intense discomfort with the idea of yourself being, for example, a man or a boy, and the sense that you would much rather be a girl. Acknowledging that that can exist and that that can exist in kids does not create the idea, or does not evidence the claim, that a biological male child can actually become a girl, or indeed later on a woman. That's all you're saying there. Again, the problem is that basically you're just, if we're saying that identifying as a woman doesn't make you a woman, wanting to be a woman doesn't make you a woman, then that also would extend to really, really wanting to be a woman, even to the extent that it expresses itself as gender dysphoria. That still doesn't make you a woman. So yeah, you seem to be assuming that gender dysphoria and trans identity are the same thing.
One of my favorite things about you, man, is the fact that you will not use he, him pronouns for me. Like, could you imagine that being 30-something years old and you're that pissed off that...
Well, it's about reality, right? I don't use he, him pronouns for you. You'll have noticed. I don't use the pronouns of anybody. I don't go the opposite way and intentionally use female pronouns for you, nor do I use male pronouns for trans-identified male YouTubers. But the reason I do that is various reasons. But I don't. It would not make sense to me, considering that I very obviously do not consider the argument for the idea that you're in fact a man to be particularly well made or convincingly made. Why would I then use language that would imply that I accept that premise? It would not make sense for me to use language which implies the acceptance of a conclusion which I don't actually believe. That would just be inconsistent, and I don't think that's mad. It's just being consistent.
Surgeries that are meant to treat medical issues are not mutilation, no matter who's getting them. But a surgery that destroys a healthy body part or that slices open a healthy organ and...
Okay, yeah, this is kind of working along the lines of what I was saying when I kind of gave like my take on the idea of surgery versus mutilation. So I'm agreeing with this. I'll be interested to see what Sam has to say.
I mean, I can use the same analogy. Like, we get our wisdom teeth removed, right? Sometimes they're just sitting there. They're not doing anything. But people encourage us to remove them. So is that mutilation?
Well, okay, that's a strange question. Obviously, that's a precautionary measure because your wisdom teeth, and I guess the thing is what I was talking about was like the idea of certain parts of your body having functions. And I was saying, like the obviously very legitimate surgery is about helping your parts of your body to do function. Significantly, your wisdom teeth often don't have a function at all. My wisdom teeth do have a function, which is to be wrapped around a nerve in my jaw such that I can't get my wisdom teeth taken out or else my jaw might be paralyzed. And also they're in at an angle, so I basically have to really try to like brush them properly, even though they're right the way back here, and they could get infected more easily than other parts of my teeth. And if that happened, then it would be a very difficult medical situation to deal with because of the issue of my wisdom teeth being wrapped around my jaw. Or rather, around that specific nerve ending, which could cause a lot of quite serious complications. So I'm very glad that I've inherited that. Thanks, Mum. But the thing is, obviously, usually for most people, actually getting their wisdom teeth out would be a far less complicated process. And for a lot of people, the wisdom teeth can cause issues. I mean, I'm quite lucky in that my wisdom teeth have actually managed to find space in my mouth to get out. But for lots of people, their wisdom teeth are like way back in, and then they just like cause issues. It's your wisdom teeth. I guess the point I'm making is your wisdom teeth don't have a function. There's no reason why you need wisdom teeth, and therefore the idea of surgery causing them to no longer have that function just doesn't work. Whereas conversely, I mean, so there was a picture of Sam having had, I guess, top surgery, as it's euphemistically called. And the argument was like, does this look like mutilation? And it's like, well, you did have something, a part of your anatomy there, which obviously had a purpose, and by cutting it out, you stopped it from being able to do that thing. That's pretty mutilation-y. In the big wide world of like things that could be described as mutilation, that's definitely up there.
People get all kinds.
I mean, hold on a minute. Like, surely we're all clear on the fact that like the whole one of the reasons why the whole mutilation thing exists is because people talk about like genital mutilation. Obviously, female circumcision is the more severe example, but of course, male circumcision equally is wholly unnecessary and causes issues. And even then, it doesn't cause like issues anything like ordinarily, I don't think the complications for male circumcision are anything like as bad as they can be for sex reassignment. And yet, even still, we would say it's mutilation because it's so manifestly unnecessary, and it can cause issues. Well, it can cause serious issues, and even if it doesn't cause serious issues, it definitely causes issues in terms of how your penis is supposed to function, and like nerve endings and all that kind of stuff. For female circumcision, it's even more, like even worse. Like it's messing around with all sorts of stuff, far more risks of like very serious complications. And even if it succeeds, even if it's a successful operation, goodness me, does it like have all sorts of things going on. So if you just compare like circumcision to gender reassignment or sex reassignment, the comparisons are pretty, obvious, both in terms of what it is you're messing with, and also the idea that really in both cases it's because of some quite baseless belief that what you're doing is actually achieving something. Removing the foreskin doesn't achieve anything. Certainly all the different things involved in female circumcision don't achieve anything. Changing a penis to a vagina doesn't achieve anything. The only reason you would think any of these things achieve something is because of your particular inclination to accept some dubious ideological notions. And all that said, if there's one big difference, it's that certainly in the case of, for example, male circumcision, it's a far less involved and, if you like, destructive act than doing the a vaginoplasty is. So yeah, I don't think there's too much of an issue with saying with confidence that we are talking about in a very real sense mutilation here.
There's places where you can get top surgery with parents consenting, with therapist letters and with doctor's letters. Yes, you can do that. You can also do that with multiple other surgeries when you're a minor. And you're still not hitting my point because...
Well, okay, that seems like a pretty big point to concede right there. So you're just admitting that, yeah, actually sometimes if you are a minor, you can get these surgeries. And again, you were saying, well, you can get this with other surgeries too. But again, other surgeries which actually achieve something. Not just, well done, your perfectly functioning, healthy penis has now been turned inside out. Not turned into a vagina, by the way, because that's not what vaginas are. Vaginas aren't just holes, and inside out penis is not a vagina.
Because I'm talking about kids. We're talking about 5-year-olds. The kid in your book looks like he's 5 years old. You read to kids who are like 5 years old. That's who we're talking about.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's a fine point. So basically he's saying, well, actually, sure, minor in terms of less than 18, that's one thing. But, we're talking like prepubescent kids, for example, let's say. And obviously, I mean, as a point that Sam Collins made, I may have actually missed out, is that, of course, in the case of top surgery, I think prepubescent kids couldn't even have it. But yeah, okay, that's fine. Basically, obviously, in that case, I would assume that it's just a case of the book simplifying things by, I already pointed this out, but whatever.
And it's like, can you just let people live their life? Like, why do you care so much? It's so fucking weird.
He keeps dropping this weird thing. I really don't know why Sam is like saying weird so much. Like, it's been said so many times in this video, just weird. It's weird, 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 weirdy, weird, weird. And it's just like, come up with a more substantial response, please. But the thing is, obviously the question is, well, it's not affecting you. Why do you care? Why can't you just ignore it? But the thing is, if you're telling me that a claim is true, obviously I have to reject that claim if I don't think there's good evidence for that claim being true. And to be honest, for me personally, I don't really care that much. But if you tell me something's true, I'm going to have to disagree, right? If I don't think there's a good argument for it being true. I don't see what the issue is here.
There are billions and billions of people in the world. They're not going to think like you. They're not going to be like you. There's different things.
Yeah, nobody's denying that different people think different things. The question is does what they're thinking make sense? Is it accurate? Is it reasonable?
It's disgusting because I just want to live my life and make money and go fucking sailing on a boat. I don't know. And you don't want me to do that. For
who doesn't want Sam Collins to make money? Chase that bread. Is that the expression? It's like nobody's. The funny thing is, like, there's not actually anything anybody doesn't really want you to do, especially as far as like the quintessential objection to the idea of transgender identity is concerned. The only question is about actually who you are, not what you can do. obviously there is a genuine debate about to what extent the whole medical transition thing. But it's worth noting the medical transition thing is an ancillary question to the more substantial question of, are you actually a man? And within that context, that doesn't relate to anything you can do. You can do everything you want, but if there's not a good argument for this claim that you're a man, then you can't reasonably expect people to accept the claim you're a man. The same way, if there's not a good argument for any given claim, you can't reasonably expect people to accept that claim.
Minor boys have even had their penises mutilated. That also happens.
I mean, again, that happens quite a lot, I believe, in a certain religion, literally on the 8th day after birth, consistently. Obviously, again, it's worth noting that there are varying degrees of severity of mutilation, but
But even if that weren't happening, still, children are being conditioned to make those choices, quote unquote, later on in life. They're being put on that path, even though they don't understand the path they're on.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Ultimately, the point is that this idea is a very bad idea, and it's an idea which does lead to people getting these surgeries, and it's an idea which is being pushed on kids. That's, pretty simple.
Yeah, I'll take things that never happened for 200, please.
What do you mean never happened? Are you claiming that nobody's encouraged to accept this idea of transgender identity, or are you claiming that the idea of transgender identity doesn't lead to people getting surgery? Because I would argue both those things are pretty unambiguously true.
So your argument, Sam, is that the boys aren't being surgically castrated, they're just being chemically castrated.
No, Matt, that wasn't my argument. You said that children are getting surgeries. It was implied in your book. And then I asked you, how are children getting these surgeries, please?
That's a very, just casual, totally ignoring the fact that, yes, children are getting chemically castrated. Just yes, that's happening, but that wasn't my argument, so... Okay, so that was the end of the video. So yeah, I think that second video was a nice little addendum. And ultimately, again, it was really centered on this whole surgery thing, which, again, my take, which this is admittedly not what Matt Walsh said, was, well, obviously I already presented it. I didn't think it was necessarily trying to be 100% literal. But obviously, the most important question is, quite simply, does it make sense to say that if somebody identifies as whatever, that means that they're that thing, which of course I would have thought was the main point of the book. Does the fact that you identify as a walrus mean that you are a walrus? That was a point which at no point in this whole thing was addressed. It was obviously the whole reason I was watching this video, getting ready to respond to all the points being made. And yet, unfortunately, that big argument I was looking forward to never actually materialized or was addressed. So it's a little unfortunate, but either way, I'm glad that we finally got around to responding to a Sam Collins video. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I'm also glad that I didn't think that I would ever be able to respond to more than one video in a single sitting, but here it is. I did it. So please do, like if you liked, comment, let me know what you think, share, subscribe, all of that stuff. Come on, you haven't done it yet, unless you have, in which case do it. Gilded, I have this thing called Gilded. It's like Discord, but it's better. So you can check that out. It's pretty fun. I'm getting involved. I'm talking about stuff. If you're a patron, definitely check it out because there are patron benefits. There's a patron lounge. If you're giving more than $3 a month, which isn't very much, then you can actually get access to basically a place where I just talk about the ideas. So, for example, before I started recording this video, I posted on that little channel saying, "Hey, I'm just about to record a video responding to Sam Collins." So that's just about to do that. And you could have known. You could have oh, I know this now. So yeah, check it out if you haven't already. Especially if you're a patron. And of course, if these sound like cool little perks, or if you just want to support the channel generally, you can go check out Patreon. That's really appreciated. And on that note, of course, I'll just say thank you to my current patrons. In addition to the names scrolling past on your screen right now, I would like to give a special thanks to last month's patrons, Emma, Bronte, Tree Shrew, Catherine, Gabrielle, Pauline, and Kendra. Thank you. You're all very appreciated.